Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. The September 2025 basho is over, and oh baby, that's the kind of finish we want to see. Even if you, like me, really dig the chaotic situations where, like, 6 guys are in contention with 2 days left, sometimes Sumo needs the Yokozuna to just take over and own the show. That's what they're supposed to do, right? And if it was chaos all the time, we wouldn't appreciate it as much. In any case, congrats to Ono Sato for his well-timed playoff throwdown, and now it's time to solve a genuine Banzuke riddle. There are 10 guys with 7-8 records. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And 7 and 8 records have the least mobility when it comes to where they can end up on the next Banzuke. Just taking a glance at it earlier, suffice to say, where we didn't get as much chaos during the tournament, we're gonna have plenty in the next rankings. But as always, let's start with some math. Alright, let's start at the top. Ono Sato, he won the Yusho, he was ahead of Hoshoryu, he will stay ahead of Hoshoryu. Hoshoryu will remain in Yokozuna 1 West. Kotozakura, before he hurt his knee, he had 9 wins, he will safely stay at Ozeki 1 East, and we'll just have to see what's up with his knee at a later date. Aonishiki and Oho will move to Sekiwake. There had been some debate, so Aonishiki at Komusubi 1 West was definitely going to Sekiwake. There was no question about that. There was some debate if Oho had lost on day 15 to go 9 and 6, and like Waka Takakage had won to go 7 and 8. Would Waka just move over to Sekiwake 1 West and Oho up to Komusubi 1 East? Hard to say, but it doesn't matter anymore. Oho won, Waka lost. This is set up very nicely, very easy for us. Takano Sho should jump from Maegashira 7 East all the way to Komusubi 1 East. Even at 11 and 4, he would have technically been the right guy for this spot, but when you're moving guys up from mid Maegashira, there's maybe some question marks that there wouldn't be otherwise, but in this case, his 12 and 3 should put him safely at Komusubi, no worries there. The first question we have is, who's going to end up at Komusubi 1 West, Takayasu or Hakuoho? There is an argument for it to be Hakuoho. I think it will mostly revolve around, well, Takayasu got kinda saved with his 6 and 9 record, only going from Komusubi 1 East to Komusubi 1 West. Then he had a good record and went back to 1 East. This is just a little too much flipping back and forth. Plus, don't they usually want to demote guys if they lose in the Sanyaku and bring guys up when they can do it? Kind of. The thing is, there are precedents that we can look at, but there aren't many, and they're old enough that they're probably not relevant. Still, for the sake of completeness, I will show them to you. This is the Banzuke from Nagoya 2004. As we can see, Koto Mitsuki was 7 and 8, and because he doesn't have the pink background with the arrow, he doesn't go down. He ended up going to Komusubi 1 West. And there is a 2 East with an 8 and 7 record who did not go up. So they preferred the 7 and 8 Komusubi 1 East to the 8 and 7 Maegashira 2 East. This is the Banzuke from January 2007. In this case, Kiseno Sato was 7 and 8 at Komusubi 1 East, and he was one of 3 Sanyaku wrestlers who got pushed down, and one of them was 8 and 7 Maegashira 2 East Tokitenku. So these are 2 situations that are identical but were decided in different ways. But these are much older Banzukes, and they have changed things so much in the last 20 years, last 10 years, last 5 years in how they do the Banzuke that we just kind of got to take our best guess. In this case, I think, so 7 and 8 at Komusubi 1 East going to Komusubi 1 West, a half rank drop, that's really not that weird. Even though Hakuoho could very easily end up at Komusubi 1 West, I think it's going to be Takayasu, again, just flopping back and forth, going to 1 West, Hakuoho goes to Maegashira 1 East, and if he can get another 8 and 7 record, he'll be in the Sanyaku come the new year. Wakamoto Haru and Wakataka Kage. So Wakamoto Haru finishes above his brother and Kirishima, for that matter, by the math. But there, of course, is a tendency to favor guys coming out of the Sanyaku as compared to guys who were in Maegashira. Now, there's really no reason why they would put Waka behind his brother but in front of Kirishima. So what we're really looking at is this setup: Waka at 1 west, Waka Prime at 2 east, and Kirishima at 2 west, or Wakamoto Haru at 2 west, Wakataka Kage at 1 west, and Kirishima at 2 east. Which one is it going to be? Even though their tendency is to favor the Sanyaku, and this is only a half rank under demotion for these guys, I think Wakamoto Haru being ahead of them is much more likely than similar situations we've seen in the recent past. That being said, I still think it's a little more likely at this moment, I may rethink this, I think it's a little more likely that Waka Prime and Kirishima end up ahead of Wakamoto Haru. The main reason to push Wakamoto Haru up to 1 west is to make sure he gets his full +3 promotion, and so the question becomes, how compelled will the committee feel to make sure he gets that? I'm thinking more like 60-40 in favor of the Sekiwake, so it's close. I'm gonna have to think this one over. It may change for the official Guess the Banzuke entry. For the moment, I'm gonna leave it like this. Next, we've got Hiradoumi and Ura. Well, Hiradoumi was in the Joy, Ura wasn't. They're tied mathematically. Ura should end up behind Hiradoumi for certain. The question is, will Ura end up behind Tamawashi as well? And I'm really torn on this. If Ura goes to 3 west, he's still getting slightly less than his intended promotion. Tamawashi's getting his correct demotion, but Tamawashi was in the Joy. They do tend to favor guys who had the much more difficult schedule. Ura didn't have any Sanyaku matches despite doing really well. In fact, he didn't even have any matches against anyone in the Joy until the final day against Hakuoho. So to the extent that they might look at strength of schedule, but more because I think they're just going to look at 1 East more favorably, I slightly prefer Tamawashi at 3 West. Now, the fact that by the math there is a full rank between him, the committee could look at it as, well, Ura has a big gap between him and Tamawashi, but that hasn't mattered that much in the recent past. So for the moment, I'm going to go with Tamawashi being ahead. Again, this is probably a 60-40. I may change my mind on this, but I think I'm less likely to change my mind here than with Wakamoto Haru. Oshoma fits in perfectly at Maegashira 4 West. That's great. Kusano, he had a higher rank than Shodai and is ahead mathematically, so those guys should both slide up a half rank each. Onokatsu will probably end up at Maegashira 6 West, not moving with his 7-8 record. Now, Churinaumi is at +3, sitting at 7 West. He's gonna move up. So are they gonna put Atami Fuji ahead of him? Atami Fuji's only a half rank behind. He was in the Joy. He definitely had a harder schedule, and Churinaumi's gonna get over promoted regardless. So if we do that, that puts Atami Fuji there and Churinaumi at 7 East. And honestly, I think this looks okay. The alternative with Churinaumi here and Atami Fuji here, like just in terms of what they've earned per se, I think this is fine, but what the committee is going to do, again, this one's close. I suppose this one sort of depends on if you think they look at certain guys more or less favorably, and they certainly have not seemed to want to do Atami Fuji any favors recently, but that doesn't mean that they're going to just stick him further back. But that's ranging into the realm of minor conspiracy theory, and I don't really want to do that. Once more, I may change my mind here. I don't think it's a coin flip though. I think it is slightly favored towards Atami Fuji getting the higher spot. Okay, and now we are getting into the really crazy stuff that's not going to be fun to deal with. Now at first you look at it and say, well, let's just start sliding guys up. Okay, well, Kinbozan and Midori Fuji are next, and they can only go up 1 more rank because then they stay in place on 7 and 8. And there's spots above them, so who's going to go in those slots? Well, Abi is next, and he was doing terribly at Maegashira 1 West, but, you know, he was in the Joy. He's the next one in line mathematically. Pushing him to 7 West does seem to make sense. And in fact, part of the reason why Atami Fuji at 6 West makes sense here is because Abi could actually end up ahead of Churinaumi. That would give Churinaumi +3 ranks on 9 and 6, the expected promotion, and that creates an extra gap for Abi to slide into, down 5.5 on 3 and 12. They have definitely been trying to give guys a more appropriate demotion when they have losing records, so this like too much of an under demotion is something that that the committee has avoided more recently. So for the moment, I am gonna still put Chura and Umi ahead, but I think Atami at 6 West is more likely because they're going to be arguing about who gets 7 in East, who gets 7 West between Chura, Umi, and Abi. But let's scroll down because we still got to fill out 8 East. Daisho can't do it because he can only go up to 10 East. Who's next? Tobizaru. Well, if we move Tobizaru up to 8 East, he's getting plus 7 ranks on a 9 and 6 record. Now, if that's the appropriate move, then okay, that's what happens. He got lucky. And it's hard to argue that Ichi Yamamoto should really be ahead of him because Ichi, even though he was in a position where he should have fought some Sanyaku guys towards the end, he was doing so badly that they just skipped him. Nonetheless, will they still want to put Ichi ahead of Tobizaru? Hard to say. I'm kind of leaning against it, but it would look like this. Ichi goes down 2.5 ranks. 2.5 ranks on a 4 and 11 record. That's nothing. I really have a hard time seeing them do that. I think the committee is going to look at what is an appropriate demotion for Ichi and then fill in around that rather than try to figure out what is an appropriate promotion for Tobizaru and then fill in around that. So for the moment, we'll put Tobi at 8 East and then we'll put Ichi at 9 West. Fujinokawa, if he fills in the next spot, that's 10 West. He only goes down 1 on 6 and 9, but that's pretty reasonable. Roga, 7 and 8. Maegashira, 11 West. Well, now we got to fill in 11 East. Who's next? Tomokaze, Shishi? What about Koto Shoho? He would seem to make sense. Tomokaze's gonna go up to here at the minimum. To 12 East, he gets plus 4 on 9 and 6. That's an over promotion. Koto Shoho, minus 6 on his 3 and 12, going to Maegashira 11 East. That's pretty reasonable. That actually makes a lot of sense. Then we move Matakeyumi up to no demotion with his 7 and 8 record, and Shishi ends up on plus 5 with his 10 and 5 record. This all works. This all makes sense. But if Matakeyumi is behind Shishi by the math, because they're both low ranked, there's really no reason why they would push Matakeyumi ahead. So we'll slide Shishi up to 12 West, Matakeyumi back to 13 East. That should be okay. If we just keep going in order, then we go Ryuden to 13 West. He gets a half rank over promotion. Toki Hayate goes to 14 East. He gets a half rank under demotion. Nishiki Fuji doesn't matter for the moment. In fact, I'm going to slide him out of the way. But what about Gonoyama? See, we've been moving these guys around, and Gonoyama was horrendous, but he was in the Joy. It is so unbelievably rare that we see a guy from the Joy down here that it's like, where are they going to slide him in? Are they going to give him an under demotion to try and limit how far up some of these guys go? Because for the most part, they have been willing to under demote guys from the Joy as long as the guys from further down are getting their full promotion. It seems pretty likely Gonoyama will get saved a few ranks. So where does it make sense for him to go? Well, it doesn't make sense for him to go anywhere ahead of Koto Shoho. Koto Shoho, again, 5 East, 3 and 12 record, so he was here at 14 East mathematically. Gonoyama is down at 16 West. They were both in the Joy. Yes, Koto Shoho was at the bottom. That doesn't really matter that much. So Gonoyama has to end up behind Koto Shoho. Okay, cool. Do they put him ahead of Roga? Well, Roga was at 12 West. Roga was mathematically 4 ranks ahead. I don't think they're going to push him that far up. As much as they want to make sure that the guys with losing records get demoted, that seems like a little too much, especially as disappointing as Gonoyama was. But you could make a reasonable argument for him to end up ahead of basically everyone else. So this is going to be a pretty arbitrary decision. If he goes ahead of Tomokaze, then we start sliding all of these guys back, and you end up with Matakeyumi and Toki Hayate both getting -1 and 7 and 8, which is correct. Shishi and Ryuden both get exactly the promotion they're supposed to. That's correct. Tomokaze only gets a half rank bump. That seems correct. Tomokaze and Shishi were tied mathematically, but could this be a case where they split the uprights? Maybe. Tomokaze is going to get over promoted anyway, so whatever, just put him at 12 East, Gonoyama to 12 West. This is where the question of what is the minimum demotion they want to give Gonoyama. And we just don't see situations like this often enough to know, to even take an educated guess. For the moment, I'm going to leave it like this. I'm going to have Tomokaze ahead of Gonoyama, and then Gonoyama ahead of Shishi and everyone else who goes behind him. They could just tank Gonoyama down to 14 West. They could genuinely, I would be a little surprised if they did this, but not utterly shocked if they just did Mitakeumi, Ryuden, Toki Hayate, and then Gonoyama there. They're like, you know, you have to go to the bottom of the line. You have to go to the end of the line, and you just got to earn your way back up. But that seems, I don't think that makes sense. Having a really, really terrible record actually gives the committee a little bit more leeway with where he's able to go. So this is what I think makes more sense. 7 and 8 records go down 1. Shishi, Ryuden, proper promotions. The most likely thing to me is Gonoyama ends up at Maegashira 12, East or West with Tomokaze. Getting to the bottom of the division, Nishiki Fuji, he'll probably go to 15 East because Shonen Naomi, if he gets no demotion on his 7 and 8, he's going to 15 West. I have my doubts that they're going to push Sada Naomi ahead of Shonen Naomi because see, Shonen Naomi and Sada Naomi both have losing records. Shonen Naomi should be ahead of Sada Naomi. I don't think they're going to just push Sada Naomi ahead. That puts Nishiki Fuji at 15 East. Now they could put Sada Naomi at 16 East and push him ahead of Oshoumi. That makes sense. Asakoryu, 16 West. He goes down 2 ranks with his 6 and 9. That makes sense. We slide Chiyoshoma over to 17 West, Oshoumi to 17 East. Now, Oshoumi, Chiyoshoma, but what about Meisei? Does Meisei go ahead of those two? I think given how they've tended to do things in the last year or so, this is probable. This is the most likely outcome, but it's like a lot of the situations above, maybe a 60-40. Oshoumi and Chiyoshoma are also already not going up that far. In fact, this would not surprise me either, and this is what I'm going to stay with for the moment. Oshoumi to 17 East, Meisei to 17 West, Chiyoshoma to 18 East. There's really no reason why Meisei should be between those guys, which is the way they've been making some of their decisions, kind of why I think he's going to end up between those guys. They're going to be like, where should he go? Screw it, compromise, let's go drink. And what about these other two, Fujiseon and Asahakuryu? This has been a relatively rare circumstance where there are more guys earning their way into Makuuchi than can actually fit, which means Fujiseon and Asahakuryu are gonna have to drop back to Juryo. So what is that most likely to look like? Well, Hitoshi is going back 1 rank. That puts him at 1 East. Well, we've already got kind of a log jam here. Kotoeho, Mita, let's just push Mita behind Dai Seizan and then Kotoeho behind Hitoshi. Well, we still gotta have room for these other guys. Fujiseon should, without question, end up at Juryo 1 East. I would be would I be surprised if they put him at 1 West? No, I actually wouldn't. I think Fujiseon goes to, oh, wait a second. Kotoeho's gotta get a promotion. We're gonna put Fujiseon at Juryo 2 East. We're going to move Dai Seizan back. He's going to get over-demoted to Juryo 2 West. Mita is going to end up at Juryo 3 East. Kageyaki ends up at Juryo 3 West because that's the minimum promotion for him. And then we end up with Asahakuryu going from Juryo 11 West to only Juryo 4 East with a 13-2 record. He is getting absolutely shafted in this circumstance, but I don't see another way for this to work out. Everybody's getting a little bit screwed, and to move him any further up is going to hyper screw somebody. I don't think they're going to do it. They're not going to be that nice to guys, especially coming up from the bottom of the division. Yeah, I think Asahakuryu ends up at Juryo 4 East. Unfortunate, but hey, given what he just showed in this basho, he should still have no real problem getting into Makuuchi as long as it wasn't some kind of weird mirage. From there, we've got Hatsuyama at Juryo 5 East, Tochi Taikai only going down a half rank to 5 West, Koto Kuzan getting a nice little bump to 6 East, Shirokuma a good bump to 6 West, Kaio only 1 rank down with his 6 and 9, Kazakeno a nice big jump from 11 East to 7 West with only 8 wins, Hidenoumi, he's only going to go down a half a rank with his 6-9 record because there's not really another option. Hakuyozan, he can't go higher than Juryo 10 East because he was 7 and 8. Wow, look at all these guys. What in the world do we do here? Well, first of all, I don't care how many gaps there are, the Makushita guys are not going up that far. So what we could see, and man, this is very weird to even contemplate, but Tohakuryu, with a 4-11 record, only goes down 2 ranks to Juryo 8 East. Tamashoho, exactly the same, 2 ranks down on a 4-11 record to Juryo 9 East. Then who's next? The only option is Nishinoryu, up 5 ranks on 8 and 7. This is crazy, and yet it is, as far as I can see, the only reasonable option. The only real thing you can do besides this is put Nishinoryu ahead of the other 2, because then they go down at least a little further, so he gets 6 ranks with an 8 and 7 record. Either one of those situations is completely bananas, but they're going to have to do one or the other, because they're not moving the Makushita guys up that far. It's not happening. Tsurugisho, 5 and 10, probably only goes down 1 rank. Asasuiryu can't go higher than Juryo 12 West. We look at the guys who weren't even able to mathematically keep their spots in the division. Shiden, you gotta figure, is definitely gonna stay at Juryo 14 East under these circumstances. Kitanowaka is kind of forced to Juryo 11 East because there's no one else who can reasonably go there. There's no one else who can go there. Likewise, Nagamura goes to Juryo 11 West. Wakano Sho should end up at Juryo 12 East. Goshima, Juryo 13 East. And yes, in the recent past, they've kept guys at their current rank with 6 and 9 records, but Kyokukayu is going to be able to stay in the division with just a half rank drop. So I think Kyokukayu and Goshima will be at 13 somewhere. You can flip-flop them, but they should both be at that rank. And the only real question is, do you bump up Takara Fuji back into the division so he only goes down 2 ranks on 5 and 10, or do you give Taka Kento that extra rank bump, half rank bump, to Juryo 14 West and kick Takara Fuji out? In the past, I probably would have said they'll keep Takara Fuji because, you know, Taka Kento didn't earn his way in the division, and it's not completely nuts to keep Takara Fuji, so that they'll probably do that. And they could very well do that this time. But if we look at the last Banzuke, Dayamami was 6 and 9. He definitely dropped into Makushita mathematically, but he didn't have to go down. They could have kept Nishinoryu from coming up, but they didn't. And that surprised a lot of people. A lot of people figured Dayamami would get his 1 rank drop to Juryo 14 West. Nishinoryu would have to work on it next time. Nishinoryu mathematically was only at Makushita 2 East. Dayamami mathematically was at Makushita 2 West, so it was much closer in that case, and they still preferred Nishinoryu. That being the case, even though I think the committee looks at these barely hitting Kachikoshi records, 4 and 3, 8 and 7, and so on, with a little bit of a sideways glance, Taka Kento is so far ahead of Takara Fuji, I'm gonna put him at 14 West. And if I'm wrong, well, we'll learn something for next time. And that is the Instant Banzuke heading into November 2025. As always, Chiyo Tsuke's amazing Guess the Banzuke helper, the link for that can be found in the description. As always, the tier list recap is next, hope to get that done soon. This one's gonna be a little bit of a competition between me and the community. Who won? We'll find out. Other than that, luxuriate in the glory that was this basho, have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Which means Fujiseun and Asahakuryu, and then we're stuck with Asahakuryu. Man, I'm gonna keep saying that wrong. Asahakuryu, Asasuiryu, I screwed that up, I know. Asasuiryu, and maybe I'll just outtake my